The Forgotten Cellar. In the summer of 1955, the town of Millbrook, Indiana, still carried the faint scent of coal smoke and freshly mown hay even after the last war had ended a decade earlier. The streets were lined with neat frame houses painted in soft pastels, their porches screened against the mosquitoes that rose from the river each dusk. Radios crackled with Perry Como and the latest news from Korea's uneasy truce. And every Friday night the Bijou Theater played double features of Doris Day and John Wayne. Life moved at the pace of a Chevrolet cruising Main Street, slow enough that folks still waved to one another by name. But beneath the polished Chevrolet fenders and the starched aprons, something older and colder waited. Eleanor Hargrove arrived on the Greyhound at 4:30 on a Thursday afternoon. She was 31, widow of a B-17 navigator lost over the English Channel in '43, and the town's newest schoolteacher. The real estate man, Mr. Whitaker, met her at the depot in his dusty Packard. He was a small, nervous man with a mustache like a toothbrush and eyes that never quite met hers. "House on Maple Lane is solid as they come," he said, shifting gears too hard. "Belonged to the late Mrs. Aldrich. She passed quiet like last winter. No kin left. You'll have the whole place to yourself." Eleanor had seen the grainy photograph in the Indianapolis Star classifieds. A two-story Victorian with gingerbread trim and a wraparound porch. It looked like every other house in Millbrook, except for the way the windows seemed to watch the camera. She told herself it was the angle. The Packard turned onto Maple Lane just as the sun slipped behind the elms. The house stood at the end of the block, separated from its neighbors by a high hedge of boxwood that had gone wild. Whitaker fumbled with the key ring, muttering about rusty locks. When the front door finally swung open, a breath of cold air rolled out like a sigh from a tomb. "Smells a bit musty," he said. "Open the windows. She'll air out." Inside, the parlor was dim, the wallpaper a faded pattern of pale roses. A grandfather clock in the hallway had stopped at 3:17. Eleanor set her single suitcase on the linoleum and listened. The house was too quiet. No creak of settling beams, no distant hum of a refrigerator. Only the soft tick of her own pulse in her ears. That first night she slept in the upstairs bedroom that faced the street. The mattress smelled of lavender sachets and something sharper, like old pennies. She dreamed of footsteps crossing the ceiling above her, slow and deliberate, as though someone were pacing the attic she had not yet explored. When she woke at dawn, the ceiling was unmarked, but the dream lingered like cigarette smoke in a closed room. School began the following Monday. Eleanor taught 4th grade in the red brick building on Elm Street, 2 blocks from the courthouse square. The children were polite, their hair neatly combed, their saddle shoes polished. Yet she noticed how they glanced toward the windows whenever the wind rattled the maples, as if expecting someone to appear on the other side of the glass. At recess, a girl named Ruthie Parker tugged Eleanor's sleeve. "Miss Hargrove," she whispered, "did you hear the lady in your house yet?" Eleanor smiled, the practiced smile of a teacher who has heard every childish tale. "There's no lady, Ruthie. Just me and the dust bunnies." Ruthie's eyes were solemn. "My grandma says the Aldrich house remembers things. It remembers the man who used to live there before the war. The one who never came back from the cellar." Eleanor sent her back to the swings, but the words lodged in her mind like a splinter. That afternoon she returned home carrying a paper sack of groceries and a new determination. The cellar door was in the kitchen. A heavy oak panel painted the same eggshell white as the walls. A brass padlock hung from the hasp, old and tarnished. Whitaker had said nothing about a locked cellar. Eleanor found a screwdriver in the tool drawer and worked the hasp until the screws groaned free. The lock fell into her palm, heavy and cold. The stairs descended into darkness that smelled of damp earth and something sweeter, like rotting apples. She flicked the light switch at the top. A single bare bulb stuttered to life far below, casting long shadows across stone walls. She took a flashlight from the drawer and started down. The cellar was larger than she expected, stretching beneath the entire house. Shelves lined one wall, filled with dusty mason jars of peaches and tomatoes put up years ago. In the far corner stood an old coal furnace, its iron door hanging open like a mouth. And against the opposite wall, half hidden by a tarp, was a workbench. On it lay a leather-bound ledger, its cover cracked and warped. Eleanor brushed away the dust. The first page was dated 1938. Neat fountain pen script recorded household accounts. But as she turned the pages, the entries changed. Dates became erratic. Words grew cramped, frantic. July 12th, heard her again tonight. Told her to stay quiet. She won't. August 3rd, the children are asking questions. Can't let them near the cellar. Not ever. The final entry was dated September 14th, 1941. She knows what I did. The photographs prove it. If they find the negatives, I'm finished. The war will hide everything. I'll make sure of it. Below that, in a different hand, shakier, feminine, were 3 words scratched so hard the paper tore. Help me. Eleanor's flashlight beam trembled. She told herself it was only a story, the ramblings of a lonely old woman. Yet when she lifted the tarp, she found a wooden crate stamped U.S. Army. Inside were glass plate negatives, dozens of them, wrapped in yellowed newspaper. She carried one upstairs into the light. The image showed a young woman in a 1930s dress, standing in the very cellar below. Her face was turned toward the camera, eyes wide with terror. Behind her, half in shadow, stood a man in a dark suit. His face was blurred, as though he had moved at the moment of exposure, but the shape of his shoulders was unmistakable. It was the same stance Eleanor had seen Mr. Whitaker use when he shifted gears in the Packard. She sat at the kitchen table until the light failed, turning the negative over and over in her hands. The woman in the photograph looked familiar. The high cheekbones, the slight tilt of the head. Eleanor had seen that face every morning in the mirror since she was 16. The woman was her mother. Eleanor had been told her mother died in a car accident in 1939. Her father, God rest his soul, had never spoken of her. Now the cellar had given her a different story, one written in fear and locked away with a brass padlock. That night the house changed. The grandfather clock began to tick again, though no one had wound it. The hand stood at 3:17, the exact minute she had first noticed it stopped. Eleanor lay awake listening to the soft scrape of footsteps crossing the attic floorboards above her bedroom. They moved with the same deliberate pace as in her dream, pausing directly over her bed, then retreating. At 3:17 exactly the footsteps stopped. The clock chimed once, a single hollow note that echoed through the empty rooms. She rose, pulled on her robe, and climbed the narrow attic stairs. The bulb overhead flickered as she pulled the chain. The attic was a long, low space filled with steamer trunks and broken furniture. In the center, illuminated by the unsteady light, stood a dressmaker's dummy draped in a faded floral print, the same dress her mother wore in the photograph. Pinned to the dummy's chest was a fresh newspaper clipping, yellow but not old enough to be from 1939. The headline read, "Local teacher found dead in cellar." The date was tomorrow's, August 12, 1955. Eleanor tore the clipping down. Her fingers left damp prints on the paper. She was not dead. Not yet. She spent the next day in the county courthouse archives, the ledger and the negative hidden in her purse. The clerk, a woman with steel-gray hair and a mouth like a snapped purse, remembered the Aldrich family. Henry Aldrich was a photographer, she said, sliding a dusty ledger across the counter. did portraits for half the town. His wife, Clara, disappeared in the fall of 41. Folks said she ran off with a traveling salesman. Henry joined the army a month later. Never came home. Killed in the Pacific, they said. Eleanor's voice was steady. And the house? Who lived there after? The clerk's eyes narrowed. No one for years. Then old Mrs. Aldridge, Henry's mother, moved back in during the war. She was the one who locked the cellar. Said the devil lived down there. Died last winter, just like Mr. Whitaker told you. Heart failure, the doctor called it. But between you and me, she was scared to death. Eleanor thanked her and left. Outside, the August heat pressed down like a hand. She walked to the Bijou and bought a ticket for the matinee. Not because she wanted to see the picture, but because the theater was the one place in Millbrook where no one would ask questions. In the cool dark, she sat alone in the back row and let the newsreel wash over her. Images of President Eisenhower smiling, of children eating ice cream at the county fair. Normal life. Safe life. When the lights came up, she realized she had not watched a single frame of the feature. Instead, she had stared at the blank screen and seen her mother's terrified face staring back. That evening, she returned to the house with a plan. She would photograph the cellar exactly as she had found it, develop the film in the makeshift darkroom she had set up in the bathroom, and take everything to the state police in Indianapolis. Evidence. Proof. Then she would leave Millbrook forever. She worked until midnight. The negatives developed slowly in the chemical bath, images rising like ghosts from the paper. Her mother's face appeared again and again, always in the same pose, always with the blurred man behind her. But in the final negative, something new had appeared. A third figure, standing at the very edge of the frame, half hidden by the furnace. A woman in a modern dress. A woman with Eleanor's face. She dropped the print into the stop bath. The chemicals hissed. When she lifted it out, the third figure was gone. The clock struck 3:17. Footsteps crossed the attic again, faster now, descending the stairs toward the second floor. Eleanor grabbed the ledger and the prints and ran for the front door. The knob would not turn. The deadbolt she had locked herself was somehow thrown from the inside. She beat on the wood until her fists bled. From the kitchen came the sound of the cellar door opening on its own. She backed away, pressing against the wall. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of damp earth and copper. A voice drifted up the stairs, soft, feminine, familiar as her own heartbeat. "Ellie, come down. I've been waiting so long." Eleanor's legs moved without her consent. She walked to the kitchen as though pulled by invisible strings. The cellar stairs yawned open, the single bulb swinging gently at the bottom. She descended one step at a time, the ledger clutched to her chest like a shield. The workbench was empty now. The crate of negatives had vanished. In their place lay a single fresh photograph, still damp from the developer. It showed Eleanor herself standing in the cellar exactly as she was now, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. Behind her, smiling with terrible tenderness, stood her mother, and behind them both, blurred but unmistakable, Mr. Whitaker in his dark suit. The voice spoke again, inches from her ear though no one was there. "He kept me here all these years, said the war would hide what he did. But the house remembers, and now it has you." Eleanor turned. The cellar was empty, yet she felt hands, cold, strong, close around her wrists. She dropped the ledger. Pages scattered across the stone floor like fallen leaves. The final page fluttered open to the entry dated 1941. The one in her mother's handwriting. "Help me." The bulb above her head flickered once, twice, then died. In the sudden dark, Eleanor heard the scrape of the workbench drawer sliding open. She knew without looking what lay inside. A length of clothesline, a rusted straight razor, and a fresh roll of film. She screamed, but the house swallowed the sound the way it had swallowed everything else for 14 years. Upstairs, the grandfather clock chimed 3:17 again. The hands froze in place. On Monday morning, the fourth graders waited for their new teacher, but Miss Hargrove never arrived. Mr. Whitaker told the principal she had decided to move on suddenly, family emergency back east. He even helped load her single suitcase into the Packard. The children noticed he was smiling as he drove away. That night, Ruthie Parker woke at 3:17 to the sound of footsteps crossing the ceiling of her own bedroom. She pulled the covers over her head and whispered the prayer her grandmother had taught her. In the Aldrich house on Maple Lane, the cellar door stood open, the padlock once again hanging from its hasp. Down below, in the perfect dark, two figures waited side by side on the workbench. One was young, newly arrived. The other had been waiting since 1941. Between them lay a fresh glass plate negative. The image, when developed, would show a mother and daughter smiling for the camera at last, reunited at the exact moment the clock struck 3:17. And somewhere in the dark, Mr. Whitaker's blurred shape moved closer, ready to take the next picture. The town of Millbrook went on with its quiet life. Radios played Perry Como. Children rode bicycles down Maple Lane and waved to one another. The boxwood hedge grew a little higher, a little thicker, until the house at the end of the block was almost invisible. But every August, when the wind came off the river carrying the scent of rotting apples, the people who lived nearest the Aldrich place locked their doors early. They told their children not to play near the cellar window that sometimes glowed with a soft, steady light at 3:17 in the morning. And if you listened very carefully on those nights, you could hear two women's voices drifting up from beneath the ground, soft, patient, and endlessly repeating the same three words scratched into yellowed paper long ago. Help me, help me, help me. The house remembered, and it was still hungry,